Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I realise it is a very busy time of year with concerts and expos and whatnot. And so do appreciate you taking the time to come and hear about mathematics in early years today. Rebecca Campbell, our maths lead for lower school, is going to talk you through how we approach mathematics and how to support your children as well with our curriculum. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to stick around and ask at the end, and help yourself to coffee and cake too. And great to see you, and have a great morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming this morning. I'm very excited to talk you through EYC maths and how we will help the children excel in this subject throughout school. So I do appreciate you coming to find out a little bit more about it. If you came to our last session that we did earlier on this year, we spoke about the new ISL curriculum that has been introduced and how we use that to support the learning. So we're going to break that down into a few stages today, focusing on what your child will learn at school, numbers up to 20 and how we teach them in early years, and number sense and the importance of number sense and the focus that we put on it. And then also those real life maths opportunities that we expose the children to every day throughout their time at school, but also some top tips on things that you can do at home to also support your children's learning journey and their understanding of mathematics. So as I mentioned, we've got our new AISL curriculum. It focuses on the 5 domains that you can see there on the screen. So we focus on number operations, measure, shape, and time, of course. Now, the children work on them all the way from toddlers up to reception, building on those steps each year so that they learn more. And in early years, we teach in a variety of ways. They'll have directed teaching time with their teacher and teacher assistants, but then also throughout the provision, there are opportunities for them to learn more about maths. That might be done quite structured with the adults in the room, or more independently through play, where they would be provided with scaffolds to support them. So the learning opportunities are consistently throughout the day in maths, and they've got lots of opportunities for that. What we really focus on here at Harrow Bangkok and our mastery curriculum is creating depth in the pupils' understanding. We want them to have a really strong foundation and understanding of maths and number to build upon, especially as they work their way through school. And that includes down in early years. There's a huge focus on that depth of understanding of their learning. So we start off at the very beginning with noticing, and 2 simple questions that help us notice. So we encourage the children to look around them. That can be in school, in their form room, as they're walking to the swimming pool, as they're on the yard, noticing everything around them. We do that through directed teaching. We might show them images on the screen, or it might be more informally as they go throughout the day. And what we really focus on is us modelling that thinking to the children and kind of scripting a response, especially younger down. So we might say things, if you look at that photograph in the middle there, for example, like, oh, I can see a beach. I can see some rocks on the beach. Some of the rocks are bigger than other rocks. And we model that thinking process to the children. What we're modeling is metacognition and meta-thinking, one of our HPL skills. And we're modeling that process to the children. We might then go, what do you see? How do you see it? So they might go, oh, well, I see some branches. I see some bigger branches, some smaller branches, and they'll most likely kind of copy and mimic what you say, but then they're starting to understand the meaning behind those words and what that actually means. So it's a really good way to encourage them with that discussion and get their metacognition thinking. The other things is it's about developing that skill of observing and noticing and getting them to look for specific details in everything that they see around them and noticing that maths is also all around them. So it's really, really useful for them to start making those connections when they're younger, and then that really bodes well for them having a good foundation and understanding of the world and the maths in the world around them. Once we move on then, from noticing, we go to sorting. And sorting is an incredible skill that the children can learn at this young age. So as you can see, there are some questions on the screen there that we might use to help the children promote sorting. Sorting is an excellent reasoning skill that the children can use. So the questions that we ask are to encourage that reasoning. So, what can you see? Are they the same? Are they different? And what we'll find is the children will probably give very different answers to what you were thinking. And that's great. They might see things differently. So it might be that they start comparing the objects and they go, well, these objects are bigger and these objects are smaller, and they sort them into two piles. They might do it based on pattern, and they might organize, well, these ones are striped, these ones are spots, if you look at the sock example. Or sometimes they might organize them in not a mathematical way, and that's okay as well. It might be by color, but they're still starting to classify and order and really analyze objects and start to put them in place. So again, using those reasoning skills to develop their understanding of that. And it really creates a great foundation for problem solving as well. At a really young age, they're making these connections and making these links. You'll notice on the screen I've put some of our HPL skills because they're analysing. They're looking at objects, they're thinking about it, and through those probing questions, they're starting to analyse. They can be creative in the different ways that they might sort objects, and they might do it one way, and then their friend might do it a different way. And then they're also starting to build those connections. And at this age, it's so important when we're trying to create depth in their knowledge of maths that we build connections with their understanding. So sorting is a really, really important tool. And also, the best thing about both noticing and sorting is there is no right or wrong answer. Okay? If they say something that possibly isn't quite right, that's okay. You can then model back that language to them in a different way. It gives the children the opportunity to build their confidence and also start to take risks with their learning at a really young age. So that kind of focus on there is no right or wrong answer. How they organise it is really up to them, and their thinking at that stage is really, really important. Okay, we're going to move on now specifically to number and how we teach number throughout school. So numbers up to 20 is kind of where we would expect them to know by the end of reception. Not necessarily in great depth all the way up to 20, but they would have awareness of them. And they can rote count up to 20. Many of the children can use rote counting 1, 2, 3 beyond 20 and encourage that, celebrate it. That is a really great thing. However, we do focus on the depth of our children's understanding, so we really focus on those numbers between 1 to 5 initially, and then moving on to 6 to 10. And I'm going to talk about how we focus on them and how we really build the children's understanding with that. It can be through a range of ways that we've listed on the screen there. So investigation, play. As I said, there'll be some direct teaching from the teachers where they'll explicitly teach those numbers, but also lots of opportunities throughout the provision for the children to explore and play and investigate with their friends and their peers in their classrooms. That can often be supported with an adult, or at sometimes it might be completely independent. And throughout this morning, you'll see images of children this year in school showing those moments in their provision when they're exploring numbers. This type of learning helps develop the problem solving and critical thinking of our children, and it's really important at the young age that we do give them these opportunities to explore and investigate. So what is counting? There is actually lots of different ways that we can count and children count, and we should celebrate them counting. So rote counting is saying the numbers, listing them off, but not really attaching them to an object or a meaning. A lot of children can do rote counting quite well. We do it in nursery rhymes, singing, they'll do it throughout the day. But at that stage, there's not much meaning to the number. The next place would be one-to-one counting. So using their finger to correspond the counting, they might count the shells and they point to them 1, 2, 3, and 4. Another really good skill to have and one that they can use. One that we really focus on here at Harrow Bangkok is subitizing. And subitizing allows us to create that depth and understanding of our children. So when they look at a number, they know by looking at it what the value of that number is. So it's knowing and seeing. So for example, if they see 3 rocks, they're not having to go and count the rocks. They can go, oh, that's 3. I know that's 3. And what we really focus on with those numbers from 1 to 5 and 6 to 10 is how we build that, because that is especially quite tricky at a young age to just see that visually. So we use things like 5 frames. If you look at the third picture across there, we have the wooden 5 frames that we use, and then the 2 coloured stones. So we might say to the children, what can you see? And they might say, oh, well, I can see 4 and 1. I can see there's 4 yellow ones and there's 1 cream one. Could you show it a different way? And they might move it to 3 and 2. And they're starting to build an understanding of what the number 5 actually means. So subitizing is a vital part of our curriculum, and we put a huge focus on it to create that depth of learning. I'll speak a little bit later about how they use subitizing throughout different moments of the day, so to help create that relevance for children and that purpose of what they're learning. The next bit of counting is knowing the numeral names. So the meaning of the number. It's really important that they understand what 5 is or 4 is, but they also need to recognize that number and know that, oh, that number represents 4 and that number represents 5. And then finally, knowing that a total amount, or the last bit that you counted, means that total amount. So understanding amount and counting in a full amount. So it's actually, when you break down counting, there are a lot of different steps and lots of different ways that children count. All are important and all are needed together to create that depth in learning. So flexible thinking, and this kind of links quite closely to our subitizing. Recognizing that numbers can be everywhere. We know what 5 is because we're adults and we've learned what 5 is. But when you're introducing that to a very young child, if we just showed them the numeral 5, it's very abstract. What does that mean? So it's about building that for the children. We know that the children can count those numbers and do that rote counting, but what we want them to understand is explicitly what that number means. So number names are good, but we need much more than that. So to know that 5 is always 5. 5 chairs mean that there are 5 chairs. That's the same as the 5 dots on the dice. That's the same as the 5 leaves that we collected outside. It's the same as the 5 trains that I'm playing with. And knowing that those symbols have meaning, that number 5 numeral, it has meaning. And I think that's really, really important that we make it relevant to the children so that they can see that as well. It's really important too for children to recognise that in their environment, and that can be done in school, but also beyond school. And I'm going to talk about that this morning as well. Because numbers are everywhere. They're not just in a maths lesson. They're not just in that time when they're working with the teacher one-on-one, but they are every part of our day. So we've got some lovely photos on here of some children exploring numbers at different points of the day. And it's in all different elements of the classroom. It's not maybe just in a maths area or with a maths activity, but actually all throughout the school. And what we really encourage is that throughout their day, they're exposed to this maths. So I'll often, and if you're ever in the cafe, you might notice as well, you'll see reception teachers pointing out trees and rocks and chairs on their way to the swimming pool. Oh, can we count how many stones there are on our way up? Can we see how many trees? And it's making that maths and those numbers relevant to the children because they are everywhere and we want them to see that relevance to their life. And that's important in school, but also in their environment outside of school. And these are kind of these things that we're talking about this morning that you can also do at home, especially now we're coming into the holidays. We want to continue that love and that exploration of maths, and that can be done anywhere. It can be in a lift. Oh, we're going to floor 8. We're going up. It's going up higher, those types of language. And again, parents, it doesn't necessarily have to come from the children saying it. It can be you modelling it. It can be you saying it. Oh, we're going to the 8th floor. Oh, that's higher than the 6th floor. I've counted 3 trees. How many trees can you see? And just showing all those opportunities of maths everywhere for them. And those conversations that are really, really important. And I think that's what I really want to get through today. Those conversations about maths are really important to have. So, how does that link then further into the curriculum with addition and subtraction and supporting them through that? So With addition, we use an approach that involves physical resources, drawing of representations, and then understanding the numeral. So again, we want to create depth, and this is where subitizing at this stage becomes so important for our young learners. If they can see on that 5s frame that I showed you earlier that there was 4 and 1, then they know that 5 is made up of 4 and 1. Can you draw that in a certain way? Could it be that you're making it out of teddies or drawing it with dots? That you're physically doing that adding? Okay, what if I turned one of the rocks over and now there were 3 yellow rocks and 2 white rocks? Could you show me that with teddies? And then the children might be able to resemble that and physically make that for themselves. All of that is adding and making up those additions, but making it relevant to them. And that's most definitely something that you can do at home with their toys, with their objects. They can add them up, group them in different ways, and that all leads to their adding. But it's a whole approach of being able to represent it in objects, draw it, and also say it. And there's a huge focus down in our early years provision on being able to speak and say that in full sentences. So when you go into the classrooms, you'll hear the teacher modelling 4 add 3 equals 7. And then the children saying that back, and that real focus, rather than just going, oh, the answer's 7. It's the whole number sentence. How do you know? Well, I know that 4 add 3 is 7. They then might go and get a 5s frame, and we might say, prove it, can you show me that? And they might go and make that as well. So it's that whole approach. And we follow that in as well with subtraction. Here is an example of where we use addition to problem solve. So this is a pre-nursery example, and she's got her 5 frames and she's got her rocks. And on one of her 5s frames, she's put 3, and on the other one, she's put 2. Okay, she's looking at them, and you can see she was really puzzling how she was going to bring them together. She knew there was a link to make, and she was using her linking skills and her meta thinking, but she was problem solving while she was doing this. So in that first photograph, you'll see her go to lift one of the stones. So she lifts the stone and she puts it in the other 5 frames. And it's still 3 and it's still 2 and it's separate. And she took a little moment before then lifting up one of the 5 frames, which you can see in the bottom photograph, and moving it across. So she added the 3 and 2. She didn't necessarily go and put them straight into the 5s frame, but in her exploration, she was problem solving and she was making that addition calculation. And that was as young as pre-nursery that she's already exposed to that and thinking about that in a mathematical way. That was just in her provision. She chose to do it independently that day, and then a teacher saw and was able to support and scaffold her with that. So at a really young age, they're using their subitizing, they're using their thinking skills to help them add. That really creates a strong foundation of their understanding of number as then they develop through early years, but then also into pre-prep. So it's extremely important for us that they have this strong foundation in early years so that when they get to pre-prep, they're able to build further on those skills. It's similar with subtraction, exactly the same process, and again exposing to the children that this can be done at all elements of the day. So we can do it through singing songs and counting songs. It can be done at snack time. Children are always very aware when it comes to food about adding and subtracting, okay? There were 5 pieces of apple, but their friend took 2. Now there's only 3 slices of apple. It's giving those opportunities for subtraction really, really early in life and also relevant to their day. They can do it in their provision. They might do it in PE when they're using different sports equipment, and they can do it with their friends. What there is also a huge focus of in our early years provision is how we use adding and subtracting and our number sense that relates to the children. So every morning when they come in and they're doing the bill and they're getting registered that morning, they'll have a 5 frames up on display, and the children will be putting their faces in. Okay, we've got 5 friends in today, but another one of our friends has just walked through the door. Oh, that's 5 and 1. What does that equal? So that equals 6. And it is lovely because when you go into all those classrooms, you see them doing that maths learning straight away at the start of the day, and being exposed to that type of language, that addition and that subtraction. So very, very important. That all blends then into them having a really good understanding of their number bonds. And that subitizing really helps with that, because it's, again, showing that in a different representation. So we do really focus on from kind of 0 or 1 to 5. And then initially, especially in the start of reception, they'll really develop their understanding of those numbers before then moving into 6 and 10 and knowing how they represent them. And we know that if they understand their number bonds to 10 really solidly, that will help them throughout their school life. Because if they understand that 4 and 6 equals 10, and they understand that fully, they'll start to know that 40 and 60 is equal to 100. That then leads into things like percentages when they're up in year 5. So it's so important at this young age that we create that depth in their understanding, because it builds that solid foundation for them moving into pre-prep as well. And there can be lots of practical activities and resources that you can use to do that with the children. And that can be done in school, but also replicated at home, again, with their toys, with their food, if you're doing a bit of cooking. Anything like that can be represented at home with the children. They can be counting out the bits of pasta, or they can be counting out their toys or subtracting. So really, really useful things to support them with their learning. Another thing that we do to help them cement their understanding of number is we want it to be engaging and encouraging for the children. So lots of number songs, rhymes, singing, dancing, making it fun and relevant to them and excited. When you go into an early years classroom, and I love going down there, it's great because they want to share everything they know with you. They might sing it to you in a song. I'm sure they'll go home and they'll tell you at night, I've learned this song and it's to do with number. And they start singing it to you. And it's lovely, and it is. And it also helps them create that understanding. And it does help with that rote learning as well, that they then understand those numbers. So very, very exciting. And also a great way that they can use subitizing, but link it to a different aspect of the school and of their learning. But there are many other elements of the maths curriculum that I also want to talk to you about this morning. So I'm going to start with comparing. Now, comparing is a really great way that we can introduce measure, and we can get capacity and length and height and all of those comparisons. So it's really, really great opportunity to make maths relevant and link it to real life for the children. So again, you'll probably have seen some of our early years staff possibly lifting up water containers. Oh, is this one light? Is this one heavy? Why is this one lighter? Why do you think it might be lighter? The children are problem solving. They're thinking, oh, the water's gone. And I happened one day to walk past something like that happening. So it's showing the children that maths is, again, everywhere around them at all aspects. It might be that they compare lengths or they compare heights. They might be drawing around their teachers or lying on the ground to see the different lengths. All of that, just exposing that language to them, having those discussions. Why do you think that is? How do you know? Those types of questions help develop their reasoning skills. So really important. This can be done at meal times too. You might have a full plate of food. Now it's an empty plate of food. Just those words that they can be exposed to really helps with their understanding, and making those words like larger, smaller, full, empty, making those words relevant to them in their everyday life. Another thing that we would encourage the children to do is estimation. Now that can be done with number, but also when you're looking at measure and capacity. So it's not always important that they get an accurate answer, but more that they're reasoning with their estimations, okay? So it might be, I've got 2 containers here of juice. Which one do you think is heavier? Why do you think it's heavier? So they might say, this one's heavier because I can see there's more liquid, or they might say, I think they're the same because of the same size bottle. And some of those reasonings will be more correct than others, and that's okay. Let them talk, listen to their answers, their thoughts, and also you can use that time to model back to them. Oh, I like your thought. I was thinking, because I can see that this cup has more liquid than this cup, that this one might be heavier. So you can also model that back to the children and expose them to that type of language. And that's what they'll be doing in school, but also some ways that you can support them at home. time. Time is great for this time of year as well because advent calendars have come in. So I know a few children that are thinking about their dates and their days of the week because they're getting a bit of chocolate every morning. There's definitely kids in my class who are very excited about that still in year 5. But time is another one that we teach the kids down in early years that is really easy to make relevant to their life. So it can be their routines of the day. It's morning time. What do we do in the morning? It's lunchtime. What do we do at lunchtime? What are we going to do after lunch? And them thinking about that language and them starting to build that timetable of their own day and their own kind of structure of their day in their head. So them having a good understanding. Well, break and snack time is in the morning. So lunchtime will come after. And at a really young age, building that routine into their day. Days of the week they'll be exposed to every day. We show that in a variety of languages so that they can see it both in English and Thai, and in some cases Chinese if they need it, so that therefore they're starting to see that maths is even part of your days of the week. The dates have an important, what do those dates mean? So it's very good for their routines, but also their language, yesterday, today, tomorrow, starting to build those understandings of what those words mean and how it relates to them. So days of the weeks, months, what does that mean? And then at this stage, not in great step, but thinking about the amount of time, how long until lunch. We possibly wouldn't go specifically into hours and minutes, but starting to think about lengths of time in a broader concept and what that means to them. And then patterns. Patterns is a great one and can be done anywhere at any point of the day. So I've got some images for you and some examples of where children are making their own patterns in school. So that is developing their reasoning, their understanding. Already they're starting to think about what a pattern is. How can I make a pattern, which is kind of that higher level thinking skill. They're starting to create, again, using their HPL. So when we show the children patterns, we just simply ask questions. What can you see? What does it look like? How can you see it? Okay, and the children can start to picture that, so they can start to think about the shapes in those patterns. It might be the colours in those patterns. It might be to do with size, one big, one small, one big, one small. So all those different ways that they can even organise their patterns. It gets a lot of gives a lot of opportunity, for reasoning and exploring, and again investigating the maths that's around them. So a really great opportunity for them, and a great opportunity for them again to do. So they can make the patterns, they can draw the patterns, and they get to create as well. So very exciting for them. Shapes, and that kind of leads on nicely from our patterns. So we'll often see children when they're creating patterns possibly focus on shape or colour, and shape is a great one to show that it's all around. So we can do that with food. It's always a nice one. What shape is the snack? What shape is the piece of bread? It might be to do with the objects they're playing with. They'll be exposed to balls, so it's a really nice one to go, okay, this is a sphere shape, and it's rounded, and it's curved, and you can start to be exposed to that language at a really young age and see the purpose of shape and how they understand it. So again, shapes are everywhere. They're in our outdoor provision, indoor provision. They're in every room that the child walks into. And for us as adults, it's important that we're encouraging that noticing that we spoke about earlier, and that seeing of the shapes. So we want to encourage the children to look around them. What shapes can you see in this room? When you look in this box of toys, what shapes can you see? Is there a circle? How four-sided shape? How do you know it's a four-sided shape? Their friends about their knowledge of shape. It helps them also build a very base knowledge of 2D and 3D shapes, but also their reasoning, because they're explaining how they know that it's a circle or how they know that it's a square, which is really great for them at a young age to already start to explain their understanding. This can also be done in every element of maths through games, and games are a great way to encourage our children to use their maths in a fun and exciting way for them. And going into the holidays, we'd encourage you as well, play games with the children. And even it might not be the purpose of the game, you might be doing Connect 4, but what shape are these that we're putting into the Connect 4? They're circles. You could do some subitizing with that. How many red can you see? How many yellow can you see along the bottom? What number does that make? There's 4 and there's 3. that makes 7. So even though you're playing the game, through those questionings or the modelling, especially for our younger children, you just modelling that language to them, they're being exposed to that maths through a fun and engaging way for them. It can be done with dominoes, which have a very similar symbol to what dice does. So the children, especially in reception nursery, will recognise those patterns, that those dots with 2 rows of 3, that means 6. So they'll start to see those patterns. And then again, it can be building Jenga blocks, towers. Which one's bigger? How do you know? Which one's wider? How do you know? And just having those kind of conversations and those questions with the children while they're playing games. So this can be done in school through provision, when they're at their plays, when they're having time with an adult in the class. They might set up a game together that they play that's going to focus on these objectives in maths. But also when the children are playing independently, a lot of the time, if they see an adult do something, they're quite excited to go and then do that themselves, nearly become like a mini teacher. So often we'll see an adult might lead a game with the child, and then they'll go off later in the day and they might go and lead that game with their friends, and then they're in turn practicing that maths and modelling it. So this is definitely something over the holidays we would encourage you to do at home to support your child with their learning over the holidays as well, and also just a really fun way to get everyone involved. If they've got older brothers and sisters, their brothers and sisters can help them with this. It's just a really nice way to kind of make that maths relevant to them in and outside of school. Prepositional language. So we understand what the phrase on top of means, or beside, but actually to a really young child, when you first say those words, they have very little meaning to them. So it's really important during their time at EYC that we teach them this language. What does the word under mean? And you might show that with objects, you might show it physically with yourself. I've definitely gone under some tables or stood over some tables as a teacher to kind of show what those words might mean. You might get the children to mimic that. They might stand beside their friend or next to their friend. They might stand behind or in between. So it's making those words have meaning, because initially they will just be words to the children. They won't necessarily know what that means. They'll pick it up through everyday conversations and work it out, but what we really focus on is making that explicit to them. They'll naturally quite investigative. They want to inquire. They want to find things out. So they'll always be observing and watching. But it's also really important that we explicitly show them and teach them these types of words and what they mean as well throughout our curriculum. So the vocabulary is extremely important. Also, we do know that a lot of our children speak English, but there are some that do not speak English. So it's of huge importance that when we're teaching them, that we're teaching them both in English and Thai, and to make it relevant for them. Mathematics is amazing because it can be a shared language of such. You can visually see numbers, you can put them together. So it's a really good way of being able to have a common language of a subject. So we use maths in that way. We teach it both in English, but where it needs supported with possibly Thai, we will also teach it in Thai so that the children can develop their understanding of the English vocabulary, but also their understanding of the mathematical concept as well. And that can be done at home too. Feel free to teach it in Thai. They'll hear those words and they can make those connections, like our linking thinking skill, themselves as well. So these things can be taught in Thai, and we would encourage you to have those conversations with them too, in Thai and English where possible. Always linking it to those real life examples. But with all of the elements of the maths curriculum that we teach, all the objectives in the 5 domains that we teach, the most important thing is the mindset of the child, and making sure that they know that they can make mistakes. Mistakes are so important in every subject, but in maths, it is how we learn. We want our children all the way from our toddlers and line cubs all the way up to year 5 to explore and investigate and take risks with their maths learning. And that starts from their very young age. So we want them to know that mistakes are good. Mistakes are how we learn. Get things wrong. You might not be able to do it today, but it's I can't yet. And I think that's really important. That positive mindset, that maths is something to love and explore. We want them to have that passion for the subject rather than be fearful of getting something wrong. Because actually, what we know is that mistakes are exactly what we need so that we can improve and problem solve and become stronger mathematicians. So with everything that we spoke about today, the most important thing is that positive mindset. I can do it, or I will be able to do it soon, and that thinking that, mistakes are good. That's how I'm learning. That shows me that I'm learning something today because I've made a mistake and now I know that that way is not correct. So that is so important between everything. And I think that will follow them throughout their whole time in lower school. That is exactly what we believe. And it's exactly what I say to my year 5 children now, because that's how we problem solve. It's how we reason. It's how we make understanding of what we're learning. So important. And also that passion and love for the maths and that curriculum, that relevance to them in their everyday life. That is all from me, and I'm happy. I'm going to stay around if you have any questions for me and anything you want to discuss further. I'd also ask if you have a moment to fill in our feedback form. You can get it from here, or there's a copy just round the side as well for you to fill in. But I just want to say a huge thank you for coming. I know it's a busy time of year, and we've lots of amazing and exciting things happening in our early years curriculum for maths. So thank you for coming and hearing about them. And if you have any questions, feel free to come and grab me. Thank you very much.